Okay, so in this lecture we talked about water balance, we talked about electrolyte balance, we talked a little bit about acid-base balance, and we started by talking about total body water. So this is just the sum of all of the fluids or the water in the body. And total body water is divided into intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. Now, intracellular fluid, this is found inside cells, and that's the majority of body water, about 67%. Extracellular fluid, this is found outside of cells, okay? And this includes interstitial fluid, which is the fluid between cells, and the intravascular fluid, which is basically just plasma. Alright, then we talked about the movement of water between compartments. So osmosis, this is just the diffusion of water across a semi-permeable membrane like the cell membrane. And this is basically regulated by the concentration of particles that do not or cannot diffuse. Alright, so if you have more stuff in one compartment, water is going to move to that compartment to try to dilute it. Now, fluid also moves between the extracellular compartments, so basically between the blood and the interstitial space, okay, the capillaries in the interstitial space. And there are two main forces that dictate which way water moves. You have hydrostatic forces, which push fluid. This is basically, what happens for filtration. And you have the osmotic or oncotic forces, which pull fluid. Okay, and albumin, of course, is very important for that, which we'll talk about. So let's just review these really quickly. So we had 4 of these forces. All right. So this is our capillary. And the first one was capillary hydrostatic pressure. Okay. And this is the force that is pushing water out of the capillary and into the interstitial space. Okay, so things like blood pressure or increased venous pressure, anything that increases pressure in the capillaries will increase capillary hydrostatic pressure. Okay, then we had capillary oncotic pressure. And this is the pressure that pulls fluid into the capillary. Okay, so plasma proteins like albumin are really, really important for increasing capillary oncotic pressure. Albumin is important for keeping water in the capillaries and keeping water from leaving. Okay. Then we had the interstitial components. So we had interstitial hydrostatic pressure. Okay. This is the force that pushes fluid from the interstitial space into the capillary. Okay. And then finally we had interstitial oncotic pressure. Okay, and this is the force that pulls water into the interstitial space from the capillaries. Okay. And this just is kind of a prettier picture of all of this. So again, capillary hydrostatic pressure, this is a filtration force. It's the pressure that's pushing water into the interstitial space. Okay. Interstitial oncotic pressure, this is pulling water in that same direction. Okay, so it's the force that pulls water from the capillary into the interstitial space. Interstitial hydrostatic pressure, this is the force that is pushing water into the capillary. And then capillary oncotic pressure, this is the force that is pulling water into the capillary. Okay, so again, hydrostatic pressures and forces, they push. Oncotic pressures pull. And again, this is a capillary, so we have the arterial end of the capillary, and then we have the venous end of a capillary. Most of this fluid that ends up out here is going to be reabsorbed on the venous end of the capillary, but whatever is not reabsorbed will enter the lymphatics. Okay, that's the job of the lymphatic system, is to pick up this fluid, which is basically just plasma with some white blood cells and stuff in it, and then return it to the bloodstream. Of course, it filters it through lymph nodes and all of that stuff too, but that's the main job of the lymphatic system. Okay, then we talked about fluid regulation as far as intake. So we have receptors in the hypothalamus called osmoreceptors, and they are going to be stimulated by dehydration of cells, by decreases in blood volume or blood pressure, and a couple of other things. Now, there are 3 really important hormones that are involved with fluid regulation: angiotensin II, aldosterone, and antidiuretic hormone. All right, and we talked about the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, so let's run through that again. Okay. So this is going to be our blood stream here. All right. So our journey is going to start in the kidneys. Okay. And in the kidneys, we have these cells called JG cells. Okay. And they sense drops in blood pressure. Okay. And when they do that, they're going to release an enzyme/hormone into the blood called renin. Okay. Now, our next organ here in our little journey is the liver. Okay. Now, the liver is going to release an inactive enzyme into the blood called angiotensinogen. Okay. And angiotensinogen is going to meet renin in the blood. Okay. And when they do that, renin is going to basically cleave this off. Remember, when you see that ending inogen, it means inactive. So renin is going to cleave angiotensinogen, and that's going to produce angiotensin 1. Okay. Now, our next organ here, got a pair of lungs. All right. And the lungs are going to produce an enzyme called ACE. Angiotensin converting enzyme. Okay. An angiotensin converting enzyme is going to convert angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. We'll just call it A2. Okay. Now, angiotensin 2 is going to have a number of important jobs. Okay. So here's another sickly looking kidney. But one of its jobs is to go to the adrenal cortex and stimulate the release of aldosterone from the adrenal cortex. Okay, and aldosterone is very important for electrolyte and water balance. So let's just go through. I'll write these down here. So angiotensin 2. Okay. So by itself, it is a potent vasoconstrictor. Okay. We know that it stimulates the release of aldosterone. It also stimulates the release of antidiuretic hormone, ADH, also known as vasopressin. Okay. Now, let's put aldosterone over here, and we'll talk about what aldosterone does. Aldosterone stimulates the reabsorption of sodium. So it tells the body to keep sodium. It also tells the body to secrete or get rid of potassium. Okay? And if we keep sodium, we keep water, and we increase blood volume and increase blood pressure. That's the whole job of this system, is to increase blood pressure. All right. Now, antidiuretic hormone, ADH, also known as vasopressin, this is actually produced in the hypothalamus, and then it's stored and released from the posterior pituitary. Its job is just to conserve water. Okay, it tells the kidneys to conserve water. Keep water. And again, if we keep water, we increase blood volume, we increase blood pressure. Okay? So, basically for exams purposes, you need to know where everything's coming from. You need to know what they do. And you need to know their function. Okay? So basically everything I've run through on here, you need to know. Okay. Okay, and this is just the words that go through everything that was in the picture. Again, this is just kind of another pretty picture. Couple of things here. So natriuretic peptides, these are hormones that are produced from the heart, from the atria, and they kind of inhibit this RAS system. They don't do it very well, but they do counteract it a little bit.